Okay, so, right, after a little bit of testing, to be honest, I've tried this once before and it was a complete failure. Okay, but got the colours completely wrong, I got the effect that I was after completely the wrong way round. So what I've done now, I've reprimed everything again with our surface primer, let them dry, and we're going to try again. Okay, so here we go with the wings, masked up, so obviously it's just primer down below, and then all we've done, 1mm masking tape, and we've followed where all they'll be. Now, two-stage process with this. Starting with the darker colour first. Airbrush. Now I've already thinned this and everything. And here in the colour cut. Now we're not going to need gallons of this. What we want to do is make sure it's even everywhere, and it's obviously right up to the ribbing, and the ribbing obviously now is the blue bit. So we're just make sure you've gone right to the end and that all the masking tape is covered, because if the masking tape isn't covered then obviously you haven't got any in there. So same for under here. So just make sure you've got it all covered. Now it doesn't have to be even or even particularly nice, because this is just a form of post shading or pre-shading. Sorry, what we're trying to do is pre-shade the bottom, which will actually be the panels. And then what will happen now? We come back. We've got a lighter mix here. What this is basically I don't know, it's probably 70% white to the deck tan, because we want a far lighter colour down in here. So pop that in, and I'm going to mix in the colour cut, just to mix in the colours. And then we want a tiny bit of thinners. Now you want this to be quite a thick colour going on here. Now there's a reason for this, and I'll explain that. What's happening is, or I'm hoping is happening, is that these on here are drying, okay, to quite a glossy type finish. Well, not glossy, but a satin type finish. So when we come along and we do this, so we have to be a little bit careful. We try and unmask. Hopefully what we'll see is lots and lots and lots of white showing through. Okay. In trouble with this, you get stuck to it everywhere. Okay, just careful how you handle it, because obviously we're still very, very wet under here. And don't be tempted to pull the long ones, because they stick to the paint then and then come off. So we just get rid of some of these like this. Okay. So like little worms attaching themselves to you. Hopefully this will be quite easy to do. Okay, so there we go. There's our underside. And originally when we were doing this is the type of effect we wanted, but obviously it's far, far too strong. So what we're going to do now with the lighter mix, this is actually the dote linen effect we want, okay? So what this has done is pre-shaded the panels in between all the ribbing. So when we go over, we want to make a nice light pass over this. Okay, this will be more the colour we want, and you're just going to build this up until you can just barely see that showing through. So it gives you that nice look of the dote linen. I'll pick this up very carefully. You can see just like this, or hopefully you can see. So when it's dry, will look eventually like this. So it gives you, let me just pop that down because it's very wet. So it gives you exactly what we want, which is, it makes it look like it's sort of stretched because it's giving it that shading underneath. So we just do the same on this one. So we just peel these all off. Now, if you don't like it, and to be honest, this has given me no end of trouble on this one, as you've seen already, but this is my preferred method now. It gives you more control over what you actually get, because at any point, if I thought that was a little bit too strong, I can go over it again and just put another coat on it. Whereas before, if you were in a situation where the bottom colour was your final colour, obviously the light in this case, under here, you're stuck with it, because you can't actually go back, because you'd have to mask up all the teeny tiny stuff afterwards, and that would be a bit of a nightmare. So I've got to do this bottom wing spar, okay, and then obviously we've got to do all the other areas connected as well. So we've still got to do all the control surfaces, they all need to be done. Sorry, just being a little bit careful, getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here, taking it off a bit too early. You want to really leave this to dry, then peel it off. But I'm quite excited with the way this is going, so I'm quite eager to see how it is. But as I said, you want to ideally give this about half hour to go off before you attempt this. But we've got to do the control surfaces, we were saying, obviously the lower ones in this form. Alright, and then there we go. And then we've got to do the top surface. Now the top is going to be done a little bit different because it's olive drab all over. And when we look at the top side, as you can see, it has a real stretched look to it. So there's a couple of ways we could do that. First of all is using things like pigments. Pigments are a great way. That's what you get when you take off too soon, because we've actually peeled off now that lighter undercolour. So there we go, there's a lesson learned there about speeding things through. But hopefully the shading over the top will get rid of that, and we won't notice too much because it is the bottom line anyway. But as I said, the top side will be done a little bit different when this is all dry. We're going to do them all first, but because obviously we've got a lot more stressed on it because it's pulled a lot tighter along the top surface. Where this is not too bad underneath, the top side will really make it, but I've got a plan for that too. Okay, so we pushed on a little bit. What we can show you here, as you can probably see, we've primed up the main fuselage areas on the actual plane itself. Now, a couple of things. Putting in the top deck, as we know, wasn't exactly a brilliant fit, but to be honest, a little bit of care taken with it, you can get it to sit down quite nicely. And by just using our primer, which we went over with the Valero polyurethane primer, it's taking care of all the gaps absolutely lovely. So we've got nothing on the bottom, nothing on the top. We've got a nice join behind the top and bottom decks down below. So that's all very nice. Really happy how that has turned out. Now the wing sections themselves, the bottoms come out really, really nicely. Now the thing is, a couple of things you might want to do beforehand. Obviously we've masked up, we'll speak about in a moment. You might see we've got some sanding going on here. What it is to get this bottom wing to fit nicely into the top deck. Now because we masked up, I can't really show you here, but you have to take my word for it. Test fit it a good few times before you sort of run along and have a go at it, because you might find that something like, obviously something as small as using polyurethane primers, because it's quite latexy as it goes down, it does take up a bit of room and obviously can affect your fit, because otherwise if we put this on and it doesn't fit correctly, it's going to bend downwards, all right, where it's pushing away. So it is quite important to make sure you've got this fit properly. Now I sanded all this area a lot better, so it's a nice clean drop fit now rather than any type of struggle to get it in. But really happy how that one went. And that fits in there all very nicely. Now, a couple of decisions on how you do it. You could put this together and then spray it, okay? Or you can spray it all, then put it together. Personally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do them as a separate, fit them afterwards, and probably do a little bit of airbrushing just to touch in those areas. Because I think doing these wings as separate will be a lot easier, so we can get in around there, everything else. Now you can probably see we've gone along, we've masked up, we've allowed a leading edge all around these areas to here. Okay, and then we've put the line in up here. We've done the same on all the other wings, and as you can see, we've already pre-shaded some of these in, which we'll do in a moment, but again, allowing for this edge to go right the way round. Now, pre-shading is really simple. All we're going to do is make it more darker, so when we come along in a minute with this browny, sort of reddy brown colour for the top, it will be darker as it's pulled across the stretched areas of the plane. That way we can come back and lighten up the other areas in between, perhaps the ribbing and the formers and things like that, to give us a nice different tone of changes of colour across the wing, so it doesn't just look like a bar going across. So down here we have just some We've got some XF one flat black, or you could use, in our case what we're using here is some Valera. We've got some 057, and all we're going to do is literally popping along and putting these lines in. Now, as we said with all other types of pre-shading, you don't have to be neat, you don't want to be perfect lines every time, otherwise it's going to look like a grid going across. We want this one, because it's a top area, to be stretched and everything, to have a little bit more blending. The underside was very, very firm because it's flat on the underside. Okay, so we wanted it to be exactly where the ribbing was. This, we want it to be a little bit different. Okay, and just literally come across, a little bit wet this paint. Okay. The colour mix, very, very difficult. The instructions call out obviously for various colours as we go through this. So if we just have a look, basically they're saying for your colours we are looking for, where are we? Obviously it depends on, we're using J and K in here. Let me just confirm, make sure I'm right before I tell you a complete lie. So this is the one we're going for here, okay. Now it's got a question mark even on the colour call out on the instructions, because I don't think anyone quite knows what it is. Now I've had a fiddle around and made up my own, which sometimes is quite a nice way of doing it. All this is flat brown, as in XF10, a little bit of XF54, 64 mixed in, which is the reddy brown, the NATO colour, things like that, and a little bit of grey, okay. And I've gone along and just mixed up pretty much quite a large amount, so if I ever need to do another one, I've got some here. Now when you look at it in the bottle, it doesn't look quite right, it looks very, very dark, but when you spray it, it's a lot lighter and comes through very nicely. So what we're going to do, we'll start on this wing down here. We'll just make sure it's got a good mix. Now because this is Tamiya paints, we're going to thin it with Tamiya thinners, okay, but you might be able to see down in there, it's not a bad colour, it's quite nice, okay. So we'll just get rid of that. Thinner's going in first. Okay, now this is quite a wet mix in this already. So what we'll do is we're just going to come along, put nice generous amount in there. We'll just put the top on this because, as I say, it is a mixed colour, and when you're making up a mixed colour, you want to keep it good all the time. Otherwise it's going to be coming through different shades and everything else like that. So there's that. Good old mix in the colour cup. Okay, and it was like I was saying about this model when we started, it's going to be one of those things here, we're going to be painting it all and then putting it all together afterwards. So, extractor goes on. Check our flow. Happy with how it's coming through. What we're going to do is just do a nice, so what to start with, we'll do the underside here and do these leading edges we were talking about before. Now we've got to do these areas down on the sides of where the wings would join the fuselage. Come down in here. Now we are going to lighten this, so don't panic too much if you think it's a little bit dark. Tops of the wings, spray down, nice light coat, and build it up gently, like with all pre-shading. We want it to be able to see it, you don't want to cover it too much, so as soon as the pre-shading disappears you stop completely, okay, and then come back again afterwards. Just do this wing. Make sure you do the leading edge of the wing, and there we go. And as you can probably see, you've got the darkness still showing through on that wing, and that's exactly what we want. So we'll just go along on this side, and again, work it around, lighter coat to start, go back. There we go. So we've got this light and dark showing through. This is exactly what we're after here. Okay, if we just drop this top cam just a little bit down. You can probably see this is the type of effect that we're trying to go with this, to have that nice sort of multi-change colour in there. We just want to make sure you've done the edges, leading edges especially. Okay, so we've got to do the inside area as well. So what we do, we just grab our clamps, we'll just do the bottom. Pass, okay, we can leave that to dry, but you probably see those different tones coming through already with that one, and that's exactly what we want. Just make sure it's even on the same type of wings. So pop a little bit more. We're going to come along with a little bit of a lighter shade in a moment once we're all done, just to lighten out, but I'm quite happy with that colour. It's quite a nice colour, that one. Okay, so far so good. So what we're going to do is just pop in a lot more thinners. Okay, so we've got quite a bit in there. Probably got a couple of mil. 1 mil of paint. Okay, cap back on. White paint, flat white. Now we're using Vallejo paints, but obviously you could use XF2, Tamiya, flat. Okay, so what we're going to do is put a few drops of that in there to change the colour. Then when we're mixing, when we're mixing like this, we can have a look to see what colour we've made. And what we're looking for is 1 or 2 shades of difference. Okay, we're not looking for any more than that, because we don't want to actually change the paint. We're just purely looking to sort of accentuate its colour. Now, what you want to do also is make sure it's a very, very wet mix. So what we're going to do, we're add a bit more thinners in this, because we want it to sort of bleach in. We don't want to colour at all. We're just trying to make a sort of bleachy effect. So you could overspray the entire thing with this, or, as we'll do, try and be a little bit more precise, and we're going to try and put it in between the ribbing, really where the pre-shading wasn't. So we're lightening areas, and we're trying to put it all in. So first of all, we'll check our flow. Let's get rid of the original paint that's in there. So you can see it's all sort of dirty down here. If we put a bit of this in, then you can see we're considerably lighter than what we started with, which is great. We're just going to clean the nib off. Alright, and then what we'll do is we'll just pick our wing. Okay, and we're going to shoot this leading edge to the rear slightly. So what we're trying to do is in between okay, so we're just literally coming up with this sort of fade effect to it. So what we're trying to recreate here somewhat is like stretching as well as normal. Now it's very flat, this paint, so when we come back we're going to give this a coat of gloss to make it look like fabric and everything else. Okay, so just another little bit too much there coming through, a little hint. So there it is. It just gives it a real sort of hint of, rather than actually colouring in. Alright, so we're going to do it in the way of sort of wind flow. But what it'll hopefully do is just fade it all down just a little bit as we make our way around everything. So that's the overall type of effect we want. Now it's going to be a little bit more careful on the fuselage, okay, because what we've got to do is put in some sort of post-weathering almost onto this. So what you might want to do is really thin this down a lot more, okay? So what I'm going to do is dump a bit of colour by spraying it through. And then we're going to come back in with our thinners and we're going to double up on the thinners so it really, really doesn't cover. So it's more of a bleaching effect. Because what we're going to do on the flat side is hopefully give it the effect of fabric that's been stretched, a bit bleached, a bit dirty. Blowing out so we're into neat paint. Okay, and then what we'll do is we're just going to get this up and down. Okay, and then what we're going to do is just run vertical lines up and down as we make our way around this back section. Okay, so we sort of get this stretchy colour effect, and how well the camera actually picks that out, which is quite nice. Alright, and then we're going to do the same on the top, going the same way. Hold on to it. And the other side. A little. Just do this other side for the minute. So down here we've got this checker effect. So we're just going to try and follow in just a little bit. Okay, so we get that sort of checkerboard effect going on there, just down like that. And hopefully, we'll drop the top cam down a bit. You can see we've got that nice checked look to it. Hopefully, just like that. So as I said, same for the wings as well. What you could do now, if you wanted to, because we've got a nice thin coat on this, is just gently overspray. And what that will do, it will literally, making sure you've got a clean needle, okay, just blends everything together, okay, because it will melt all the paint together. Okay, so back out the spray bay into the main desk. Sorry about the audio on the last time, we had a bit of trouble with the old microphones recording that particular one. Anyway, it hasn't stopped us. Nice to be out of there. The colour, as you saw in there, it's not an easy thing to work with. It's one of those colours which is there's no rights and wrongs. There's, you know, so really artistic license comes into a lot, but we've got to do a lot more with it. So don't think, you know, looks a bit wrong to me at this point, because here's the next stage. So what we want to do now is liven up all the detail on this stretch ribbing and things like this going across. Now the easiest way to do that and to break it up is by dry brushing. Now dry brushing large flat areas is a little bit risky, but we'll talk our way through it. So actually what we got here, kitchen roll. Now it might seem a little bit strong, but actually something like XF19, which is quite a light grey really, should serve us very, very well for this. So we've got this one down here. Now it's quite an old tub of this and it's a little bit thick. So what I am going to do is just drop a little bit of thinners in this, just to thin this down a bit. Because quite frankly, it's quite an old tub. And sometimes really, if your paints are a little bit old, a little bit thick, you know, a drop of thinners, as long as it's the correct thinners to it, so obviously in this case acrylic X28 thinners into Tamiya paint, Tamiya thinners, it should make it as good as new. So we just give it a bit of a shake. Now the reason for thinning it a little bit anyway is really so it flows a bit better. And again, it's not very strong, like we were talking in the spray bay, but we're not in a situation where literally when you're putting down the paint, it changes it really, really quickly. This, you want it so it's thin, it takes a few coats to get it to happen. So there we go. That's more like it. Okay, so a good brush. I know that you can get things like these types of brushes, which are flat-ended ones as well, which are quite nice, but what you want them to do is have a little bit of strength to them. So this, to be honest, is just a number 4 brush, I think they call it. It's quite stiff bristles, it's the rounded top, it's nothing exciting, okay, but I prefer it over dry brushing than I do this longer one. This is a Tamiya brush, but I find the bristles really, really soft. I like something to have a bit of bite. What we do, we load the brush completely, so all the paint's gone inside it as well. And then we take it over to our bit of paper here and we just rub it out. Okay, and what you want to do is get rid of all the first one, and it seems funny, and then reload. What that's actually doing is allowing the hair and the bristles itself to actually absorb the paint. Okay, so it gets drawn into it. It will give you far better and even coverage. Okay, so then we rub it nice all off. Now what we're going to do, this had a bit of a satin coat right the way over it, just to give it a little bit of grip as well, alright? But what we do, we just literally light flicking motions, and nothing too heavy to start with. Okay, but you might be able to see already we're getting a bit of a dusty type of look happening to this, and the ribbing in between in these areas here is looking a lot stronger. So we just go down here. Now don't think I can't see anything, I'm going to load my brush. All you do is start to push a little bit heavier, okay, as you go over. And that's the secret to good dry brushing. It should take a long time to come through. Okay, and there we go, we're all over there. And when you, I don't know how well the camera will see that, but you pick up between the two, you can see it. So what we're going to do now is go left and right, really over this leading edge, because we've got ribbing all down here. Okay, all over that entire area. Okay. Now the point of going back and forth with it is direction of airflow, very important. So don't start going across ways, because if you get any little lines, they're going to go across it. Now the ones if you have going with it, you think, oh, perhaps something scraped down it. You know, it's pretty, you know, it's easy to believe, okay? But if you're going across immediately, you're going to be thinking, no, don't like that. But hopefully you can see, if we just drop this top cam down a little bit, you might be able to see the difference between the two there already. So we've actually got, obviously this half is the side that's done versus the other half. It just gives it that more dusty look to it, okay? It just makes it a little bit more sort of believable as we go through. So I'll do the other side in a moment, but also the other thing as well we've got here is the fuselage itself. Now this particular side we've done already, to be honest, so we've just got to do this side, and we'll show you about doing flat areas. Now doing flat areas, because there's nothing to physically rub against, it's sometimes a little bit difficult. So what you want to do, again, load up your brush, okay, let it soak in, okay, and then get it all off. Okay, and when you've got it all off, exactly the same thing. Now what we're going to do, we're going to start from the top coming down. It's a little bit back to front for me, but what we're going to do here is be in a situation where you hit it at the top and then drag down. Okay, so we're only going one direction with this, and what this will do to start with will give you that sort of worn down look where perhaps it's got wet. You know, ship's hulls is great for this. Because what you're actually doing then is putting in a different tone to it. The other thing as well is that obviously we've got the stitching detail that runs along here and down here around the other side. It will lighten it all up. Now we'll do the same on this side as well. Okay, I'm going to put this area around the tank. And then hopefully with the texture we've got with the semi-gloss, it will come through. And then you can lightly brush right the way over. Now we've got this ribbing effect going on here, and that's what we did to this top half as well. So we give this another go over the top now, left and right, just showing that ribbing coming all the way through down the sides of this cockpit, but that stitching should nicely show through now, and all that riveting detail come through, so we end up with something looking like that, which hopefully you can see is really what we're after. It's that type of sort of feathered in look. Now this side as well, because it only has one little go, we can give another coat now. Okay, and if you do get any like these little scuffs that's just happened there, it's great because that's what it has in the on the real thing. So we just push a little bit harder now. And this side doesn't have the stitching as the other side has. Okay, so there's less detail to pick up here, but as you can see, you can go along there, give it some scraping, some scuffing, and then obviously you can do it to the underside as well with the white side. We're going to do something a little bit special with that with a wash later on, but certainly you can do all these areas as you feel. Okay, and there's our fuselage half, I think looking really the part. So we're getting the other part of the wing done. Exactly the same, do the other bits and pieces, they just need a few more little bits done on here. This one needs a little bit stronger, and we can go around and we can start fixing it together. So we can start putting the bottom wing section now on and things like that, and making sure we've got nice seams and joins and everything else like that.